Joseph is a brick wall. Nyes gets career point number 1 as the Leafs win the season series against the Lightning. Welcome into Rinkwide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, free casino games and sports odds. It is time to play at Bodog.net. Rob Wong joined alongside by David Alter, who comes to us from Amalie Arena, where the Leafs beat the Lightning 4-3 in a playoff preview. It'll be maybe a week, less than a week, when these teams square off in round number 1. And Dave, it was really interesting for me coming into this one what we would see out of both of these teams. We saw prior to the game that the Leafs, of course, were going to sit some players, most notably Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner, and Mark Giordano. They, of course, were forced to go to Joseph Woll, and we'll get into that, of course. But this ended up becoming a bit of a mess. 52 combined penalty minutes between both teams. There were 2 fighting majors. There was a lot of extracurricular activities. I don't know if Tampa was trying to send a message in this one with the physicality, but the Leafs definitely responded in this one. What did you make of this mess of a game? Let's just put it that way.
Look, I think it bodes really well for the Toronto Maple Leafs that you rest Mitch Marner, Auston Matthews, and you dress one player short. And given all of that, Tampa's got their best players in there, and you come out with a victory despite all that, despite kind of being baited into a lot of stuff, how physical and aggressive it was. They didn't get pushed around, and they came out with a really good result. Joseph Woll is good again. William Nylander rises to the occasion with 2 of the most offensive players out of the lineup and gets 3 points. Matthew Nyes getting his first career NHL point, which he thought was a goal. All those things combined are good things, given the way they went into today, given that it was the second half of back-to-back games, given that it was very much a meaningless game in a lot of the ways, because it is Toronto versus Tampa. 2 and 3 are already locked in the Atlantic Division. These teams are going to meet in about a week's time. And so it's all very positive. There's, maybe you can kind of look at the last couple of games. There's been a lot of shots and goal on the other side, and maybe that might be a little bit of a concern. But again, this team is learning how to play defensively and learning how to get results in what would otherwise be these types of games that would normally go against them. So it's hard to pick apart this type of game and kind of look at negatives here. I think you look at the fact that they dressed the player short as well, which I'm sure we'll get into. All those things add up for feeling about as good as you want to feel going into the postseason.
And of course, as we always say after these games, since they've clinched a playoff spot, the number one priority is to get out healthy. And as far as we know, everyone was able to come away unscathed in this physical affair against Tampa. And I tweeted it, during the game when tempers started to rise and we saw a parade to the penalty box by both teams, that either Tampa Bay is, trying to rattle the Leafs in this game and send a message and kind of set the tone for game one, or they feel like they might need to pull off some shenanigans here in game number one or, the first round series against the Leafs. I mean, Tampa Bay is one of the most penalized teams in the league, so it's not exactly out of character for them. They've got some guys that definitely straddle the line when it comes to the physicality element of the game. But, I just thought in this one, it was kind of interesting that they, seemed to make it a point of trying to rattle the cage a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was important that both teams kind of set the tone. I mean, this is what we expected. I don't think anyone went into this game and reasonably thought Tampa wasn't going to rattle some of the cages here and kind of try to get guys off their game a little bit. Maybe except for one little incident in the second period where Michael Bunting takes a penalty as he goes in to defend John Tavares, and you can kind of question that whole thing. Outside of that, there were a lot of different things that happened, but you saw Tampa get called on that too. But the only concern I would have for the Leafs maybe coming out of this one is that I think they were 8 for 8 on the penalty kill tonight, which is good, but also you can't give up 8 and expect the game to go the way it did tonight. Like that's like Tampa's going to convert and do those things when it matters there and kind of close and collapse in the interior. And I'm really curious to kind of see what this translates into. I think Tampa needed some sort of message to be delivered to themselves. So they came out playing their brand of hockey to start, but Toronto weathered it. They showed a little bit of the difference here that without some of their top guys, they could withstand it and not get rattled. I think that's number one. They didn't get rattled, especially early on when that tone was set by Tampa.
Yeah, I think a lot of people definitely like seeing that from the Leafs side of things, and we'll get to some of the response on that end. But I feel like for the second straight game, we're sort of, burying the lead and burying the top story for a lot of people. And yesterday, of course, it was, Matthew Knies making his NHL debut in less than 24 hours. He's playing yet again in career game number 2 and picked up his first career points on an assist on a Ryan O'Reilly goal. It was inches away from becoming his first NHL goal, but regardless, picks up the point. The rookie says it's nice to finally get on the board.
I honestly thought it hit the back of the net and came back out, but I don't know, happy I could just get on the board, and O'Reilly batted that in. He was apologizing to me, but I mean, it was a good play.
And of course, in this one, he is forced to play just a few more minutes because was forced in action in a higher role, I should say. Actually did play less minutes in this one, just 12-10 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, but was elevated into that second line, if you want to put it that way, with Ryan O'Reilly and William Nylander, Dave. But I thought tonight definitely looked impactful. I mean, he had 3 shots on goal, picked up the assist there, had a nice opportunity earlier in the game as well, and a nice glove save by Andrei Vasilevsky. And, I think this was the game a lot of people were really interested to see as far as maybe a bit of a measuring stick for him going up against the first round opponent for the Leafs. How would he fare? Would he kind of shy away from things, or would he stand up for the challenge of going up against the first round opponent? And if you're just going to take this one game sample against the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's pretty clear that it doesn't seem like the bright lights are going to get to Matthew Knies in a series against
that was certainly good. I do give you that. And I know he made a lot of plays that kind of made you feel good. But at times I did see some situations where it looked like, there were some bad plays in his own end or mistakes. And those are going to happen for a rookie as well. And I thought that happened maybe a little bit more often, but it was one of those things where the good, cool plays kind of outweighed the bad plays, and that kind of happened tonight again. So I think that was expected, given that this was Tampa and not Florida, even though Florida was more desperate. This is the one everyone was kind of looking to. There was also the emotion of coming back into this building so many days after, 2 to 3 days after he just lost a national championship on this ice with the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers. And he even said afterwards, he was like, yeah, I hate this building. Kind of going in, and he didn't forget at all when he walked in. And so, you carry some of that. You already have an NHL game. It's a whirlwind. You're doing a lot of different things. Still has not had a practice with the team as well. So you kind of have to look at that as well. But all in all, I liked the way he played tonight, but there were some more mistakes. But again, that's something that you expect from the rookie. I don't think you can take these 2 days and say he's definitely on the playoff roster. I know people are getting really excited in that regard, and there are some good things to like. And, if there is an injury, to me, he might be like the 13th forward and still get in anyway. But I think it might be a situation where you kind of look at, if everyone's healthy, you go with the 12 fully healthy guys. Knies is there. And then if after game 1, there is some sort of subtle mistake, you make the adjustment for game 2.
Yeah, I'm still standing firm on that. I don't believe he'll be in there for game 1, but could be in there as early as game 2, depending on what happens. I think it's pretty clear that, he brings an element to the bottom 6 if he's, in that role that a lot of these guys don't have, whether it's a Zach Aston Reese or even a Sam Lafferty. But he's been off to a nice little start here in these first 2 games, and definitely gives you some optimism that this is a guy that could be potentially a big-time player for this team moving forward, and maybe as early as the first round. And another guy who definitely is climbing up the prospect rankings, and I guess you can still call him a prospect at this point, Dave, because Joseph Woll has yet to play, more than 10 NHL games, or was tonight his 10th NHL game, I believe. But he was incredible again tonight, thrust into such a crazy situation with the amateur tryouts and Ilya Samsonov unavailable and all the cap stuff going on. But after the game, Joseph Woll spoke about how wild of a day it was.
Yeah, truthfully, all way over my head. I trust, we have awesome players, but we also have awesome staff and awesome management. So it's pretty cool to see, them working and doing everything they can. So, I leave that to them, and I just go out and focus on the game.
Yeah, and he definitely focused tonight. And I know you've talked about it, and we've touched on it seemingly every game that he's been in the goal this year. Just how focused of a guy he looks to be out there on the ice. I mean, really doesn't get rattled very much, whether it's a good goal he gives up or not a good goal he gives up, but whether it's a goal where you tip your cap to the opposition or if it's a bad goal, like he just kind of moves on to the next thing. And you look at that final sequence over the final, 2.5, 3 minutes where Tampa's looking to tie things up. Eventually they go on a power play with the extra skater. So it's, 6-on-4 at one point, and he made some big time stops and some big time saves there to help the Leafs win that game. But, 46 saves, considering the situation, considering the opponent, this guy just continues to sort of pass every hurdle that's put in front of him. And as it stands right now, I know Matt Murray is working his way back, but I just don't know how you can go into a playoff series or even a playoff game right now without Joseph Woll as your backup.
Yeah, I think he's deserved the chance to be the backup for sure, just given the limited time that he's been there. And it doesn't appear as though Matt Murray is close to returning at this point. So you factor all of that in, and the way Joseph Woll's been able to have this crazy turnaround season, it's all good things. And I think it's still important to point out that, again, this was kind of another meaningless game. It was important for him. He's come into these regular season games and has performed really well. But, the mettle of a goaltender is really tested in the playoffs. He didn't have a playoffs last year with the Marlies, got hurt. The Marlies didn't make it to the playoffs anyway. And he just doesn't have a lot of playoff experience at a lot of different levels. So the only thing you wonder, I only wonder about a goalie with this as opposed to with skaters, because, skaters skate in tandem with their lines. But how a goalie performs in the playoffs and how they do in the regular season are probably more different than any other position. And I'm sure all the meditation and focus and all that stuff is going to bode well for Joseph Woll if he gets that opportunity to go in, should something happen to Samsonov or Murray is not available back in time. But you just don't know until he gets into, the real pressure cooker, when like every save that he has to make is that important and it really starts to wear on you. It's really difficult. And so he's playing pretty well right now. You have to tip your cap to him. He's been outstanding. It's why the Leafs felt they didn't need to improve or add to their depth, especially at the trade deadline, with both Samsonov and especially Murray showing signs of, wear and tear or not even being available. But you still have to kind of figure out what he's all about. If you're the Leafs, you kind of hope you don't have to go to him. You hope Samsonov can kind of get the job done here. And then maybe Murray's there if you need him, but I don't know. It's a tough one, but you really have to like about the future of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Joseph Woll, who will probably be one of two goaltenders for the Maple Leafs next season.
You would think so, and it's such a massive, massive thing that they would be able to potentially have a goalie here who's got, really good cap number, and that's something that the Leafs haven't been able to necessarily get. To have a guy that could be a big time contributor with a good cap number, and Joseph Woll might be able to be that on the back end next year. But I'm just, would really love to know how the Leafs feel about Matt Murray at this stage. If he is going to be healthy for game one of the playoffs, do they feel like, this is a guy that they invested a lot in, that they, felt could be the number one coming into the season? He, of course, has all the pedigree, and, they were thinking, maybe that could be something that will be helpful come playoff time. A guy who's been to the top of the mountain a couple of times and has been through it all, but just with the injuries right now and the underperformance when he's been in there, it just feels incredibly difficult to trust him. So, do they feel like, they owe him something? Do they feel feel like, it might send the wrong message in the room? I'm just kind of curious where, they feel that, the Murray situation is at right now, if he is healthy and ready to go for game one.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the number one thing with all of this right now is they're only a couple of days away from being outside of the cap shenanigans with their goaltending. And that will be the most important thing. And then kind of figuring out where they go from there. But yeah, Matt Murray's got one more year on his deal. He's going to be very expensive to kind of move on from if the Leafs decide that that's what they want to do at that point. Again, I hate referencing Mike Babcock a lot. Like, one of the things that he said, which was always kind of true and rang true, is the truth today isn't always the truth tomorrow. And so while you feel good about whatever the situation is right now, you don't know what might happen in the playoffs and who can get thrust in and become a hero or does whatever, and the narrative changes completely. And then they feel a different allegiance and a different whatever. And so, I truly believe that when Matt Murray was brought in, he was and I said it many times, break glass in case of needed playoff experience emergency. Like, that's really what it was all about. Like, what he did in the regular season and all that stuff was fine. And they knew injuries might be a concern and whatnot, but, they want him there for the playoffs in the event they feel they need it. And I think that was the real reason they got him. The playoff experience was worth the risk for them at that point.
All right, so Ilya Samsonov, prior to this one, Kyle Dubas announcing that he's dealing with an undisclosed injury and would not play in this game. And we've got another update here that it seems unlikely that he'll play in the season finale on Thursday as well. I mean, look, it's not great to hear that. We know we've seen him in a couple of games here, kind of wincing and struggling at times to, get up. But, how much do you think this is something to be concerned about? And how much of this is sort of we got some stuff going on here with the cap, and not saying that the Leafs are doing anything untoward and that they're trying any cap shenanigans, as you mentioned. But
right.
How much of it is column A and how much of it is column B?
Well, we may as well tackle Samsonov and the cap stuff in the answer to this, because it really is more so to do with the cap. Today was just such a strange day as we made our way over from Fort Lauderdale to Tampa. There were the reports, or there were the two ATO goalies here this morning. The Leafs didn't hold Neville, but they did have a couple of goalies here skating at the rink, and none of them were there. Sportsnet's Elliot Friedman then, said that there's, Samsonov wasn't going to play for sure, but it was up in the air. And, no ATO goaltender has ever started a game in the modern era. I actually had to check this because I thought we might witness history tonight. Like, I was looking at contacting the league and trying to figure out what was going on. And the big takeaway was that the Leafs were in a potential situation where they weren't going to get Joseph Woll approved to come into this game. And I think by saying that Ilya Samsonov was banged up, which if you watched yesterday's game and the times that he kind of winced when he took that puck off the mask or whatever, we talked to him after the game, he seemed fine. But if you want to go based on that, it's plausible, right? So once it was made clear that Samsonov wasn't going to be available there, I think that's when they got the approval for Joseph Woll to play, because this is unprecedented. I went into today thinking there was no basis for the Maple Leafs to not be allowed to have Woll up here and Samsonov back him up and have that proper situation. But based on the reports, based on what we saw this morning with two ATOs skating and none of the other ones there was a real possibility that one of the ATOs was going to go in. It didn't happen. I think, I talked to so many people about this today. No one could get a confirmed idea of exactly what was said to the NHL and to the Leafs. And Kyle Dubas spoke today and tried to get specifics. He diverted it back to the league when I asked him, was the Samsonov injury the reason why you were allowed to activate Woll? Because under normal circumstances, they played that game with a man short in goal, and they should have had the exception 5010, Article 5010 in the CBA that would allow them a cap exception. But based on everything that we saw today, it looked like it wasn't going to happen until it was clear that Samsonov was not available for the game. And so it's a weird spot. I don't think the Leafs did themselves any favors by saying that they thought Matt Murray was going to be able to back up Samsonov on Saturday, because there was no indication that that was possible. And I don't think the league liked that. I don't think anyone was really buying it. And it led to what looked like a tug of war and kind of a figuring out of how the Leafs and the league were going to handle this situation. Ultimately, this looks like a compromise, but it's unprecedented because everything equal, they should have been allowed to have Woll as an exception today. Well, why they were rejected yesterday makes complete sense. They created that emergency situation by adding Nyes, and so that's why they were denied. But you can look at the Rangers as a total precedent from March, when they created a situation for themselves and were allowed to make those changes the next day. But the Leafs, it looked like we're not going to be allowed to unless another move was made there. And so I know it's a long-winded answer, but like all the details are important. It was hard to even write about today. But all that combined is what allowed for that, which is why I don't think there's concern for Samsonov being hurt. What I think there's more concern about is I think you did want to get Samsonov into one game, perhaps the one against the Rangers, because I don't think you wanted to go more than a week without having him play a game, given how many days are afterwards. And he kind of said that as well. So for everything to kind of switch shows you there were more forces at play here.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I mean, I think the level of concern with regards to the quote-unquote undisclosed injury probably isn't very high, and there's just a lot of things at work right now, and Samsonov is going to be just fine, I would imagine, heading into Game 1 against Tampa Bay. All right, let's move on to some of the other storylines in this one, and William Nylander scoring tonight, and as you mentioned, thrust into a more prominent role with Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner out. And I just feel like these last couple of games, he has been pretty noticeable and does seem to have his legs back. He's doing a lot of the things that he was earlier this season where, he's carrying the puck and he's kind of going on the merry-go-round in the offensive zone, being strong with the puck and making plays. And he picks up the goal tonight. Nylander was asked post-game about how he's feeling about his game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously felt good today, felt better as of late, so I just want to keep building off of that.
All right. Classic Willie, the 5-second clip. The man knows how to keep it concise when it comes to the post-game audio. Yeah, very.
Well,
very,
I mean, he was feeling really bad about his game and kind of down and whatever, and so for him to at least acknowledge that he feels he's ramping up now is good. Like, that's an important thing. I think they kind of need him in good spirits, not feeling kind of down about his game going into it, regardless of whatever role that he might have on this team between now and then. I think it's important, and especially in a situation where you don't have Mitch Marner and Auston Matthews, you need someone like him to rise to the occasion offensively, and he did.
Yeah, and this is the type of game that, of course, you would want him feeling good because it's the team that they're going to be playing, in a week's time. So for him to show up in this game and look a lot like Willie Nylander, I think is definitely a good sign. But as I mentioned earlier, that line with him, Ryan O'Reilly, Matthew Nyes tonight, I know they got outshot. I mean, the Leafs got outshot quite a bit by Tampa Bay, but that trio had a strong expected goals number tonight. I think they were close to 60%. And the one thing that's stood out to me, I mean, basically since he's come back, is Ryan O'Reilly's looked great since that finger injury. Who knows how much that time just helped him get his legs back, because of course he was out earlier this year when he was with St. Louis with a broken foot. And, he had some moments, of course, when he came over to Toronto following the trade, but, maybe he's a guy that's just sort of ramping it up right now, but he looks like a completely different player to me, just with the amount of jump that he seems to have in his legs. I mean, he's doing all the same Ryan O'Reilly stuff that we always see with winning the board battles and being strong on the puck and, making smart passes. But just for whatever reason, it just feels like the energy is definitely a lot more there than maybe it was a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it looks like he's ramping up into form. If there was a game I was going to be concerned about with with him and his finger injury, especially in the first period. It looked like he kind of got involved in a shoving match and then kind of went to the bench, kind of keeled over, but it didn't seem to be the finger. But if there was a game you were ever concerned about O'Reilly's finger, it would have been this game. This is the game. It looked like Tampa at times was kind of targeting things. Like it looked like they were kind of, doing side checks on TJ Brody's ribs and like things like that, where they were just kind of looking like for an opportunity to kind of inflict pain when there is that. That's what Tampa does. And so, I mean, this is the kind of game I thought, okay, maybe Ryan O'Reilly, might rest, and he didn't. And so, I think he did a really good job. I think he just has this awareness about himself to not put himself at risk in these type of situations. And he's been in the trenches before. And so for a lot of those reasons, he kind of looked comfortable and into his zone. And, he looks like he's exactly where you would want him to be had he been playing this whole time and didn't have a month off with a broken finger. And that's the most important thing that you have there, because that line there could be a potential line. You could be the third line center or the second line center, depending on if they're at home and on the road. That looks like what they've tried at times and what might continue in this series. They call him the Factor for a reason, mostly because of his last name, but he could be a difference in this series for sure.
Yeah, he absolutely can. I mean, just the fact that you can put him out there against the top six of Tampa Bay is really good, and he can be very effective, obviously. I mean, tonight with Tampa at home, they did not put out the Stamkos and Kucherov line out against O'Reilly. They put it out against the Tavares Yarncroc line, which you would expect them to do with last change, of course. But, when they head to Toronto, I feel like Ryan O'Reilly's going to be out there a lot against the top line of Tampa Bay. So that's going to be a matchup to watch for sure. Coming up on Rink Wide Toronto, we'll get to the Bodog line of the day as we'll talk a lot about Luke Schenn, who definitely made his impact felt in this one, and Jake McCabe as well. He just continues to be an absolute monster for the Maple Leafs on the back end as the Leafs get the win 4-3 in Tampa Bay. You're listening to Rink Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog. Free casino games and sports odds. It is time to play at bodog.net. It is Rink Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game. It is Rink Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, the place to play free casino games and get the latest sports odds. Rob Wong and David Alter with you. David joining us from Amalie Arena, where the Leafs picked up the 4-3 win over the Tampa Bay Lightning in their final tune-up against Tampa Bay before round number 1, which begins next week at Scotiabank Arena. Time for the Bodog line of the day. And I'm not even certain Luke Schenn was even available for a goal-scoring prop tonight, Dave, but he scored in this one, which was a pretty cool moment. Of course, his first goal since returning to the Maple Leafs, and a goal against his former team in the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was also an assist away from the Gordie Howe hat trick as he got into some fisticuffs with former teammate Pat Maroon, who is also a friend. Schenn spoke about what it was like scrapping with the Lightning tough guy.
Yeah, I ran into him this morning, talked to him this morning here in the morning skate, and obviously, a lot of great memories with him and guys on that team. But in saying that, obviously, they're competing for their team and their organization and fan base, and I'm here to do that, for my team, and for me, it's I can flip the switch. Obviously, some of these guys are really good friends, going to be lifelong friends when you create bonds and memories. When you win together in any sport, you're going to be friends for life. But in saying that, it's competitive out there. Everyone's got a goal, and no problem flipping the switch. And obviously, they're doing the same. I was getting hit out there just as much by anyone too. So it was competitive, and it's going to be a battle. And I think everyone on both sides are excited for the matchup.
And Dave, this gets back to what we were chatting about earlier, that the Leafs responded to the physicality tonight shown by Tampa Bay. And pretty early on, it was clear that they were not going to get pushed around or be messed with in this one. And Luke Schenn stands up to his former teammate and friend there in Pat Maroon. We've talked a lot about the defense core and who might show up in game number 1. we know they're dealing with some injuries right now on the back end. Eric Gustafsson, most notably. Guys are being rested as well. But did tonight give you any sense one way or another that Luke Schenn might be in there game one against Tampa?
Possibly. I think now with Gustafsson gone, it improves the chances. It's a different type of defenseman. But look, I mean, 29 hits from Tampa, 23 from Toronto. I really like all the guys you expected that you wanted to see hits from. You got hits from. Justin Hall had 4. Justin Hall was a physical beast in here. And I think that's just kind of seeing some of the other guys that were in there as well, just contributing there. So Zach Aston-Reese, he's also trying to hit a lot more. He got 3. I thought it was great. Like whenever they got into these scrums, they didn't back down. They were there. Corey Perry is a bit of a pest and agitator. And even though he was kind of a factor in that regard, Toronto didn't kind of crumble at it. At times, Corey Perry has just kind of had this team's number in the last 3 years in terms of what he brings and really getting under the skin and also being on the right side of the officiating while getting under the skin of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And so, for a little bit more of a pushback is, I think, what the Leafs needed. It's why they did what they did at the deadline and even before that, and changed the makeup of a lot of their team in that regard. And so, I think maybe Luke Schenn, I think Luke Schenn will be in the series, no doubt. I think a lot of it's going to depend on what the need calls for. And so maybe that is for game one, but if the scoring starts running low and they feel they need more of a change in that regard, maybe that's where you see the Liljegren's or Gustafsson if he can come back in time, because it's unfortunate for Gustafsson. He just seems to not be able to get a break here with an upper body injury in the warm-up yesterday, and he would have been in, and Jake McCabe actually would have not played if Gustafsson was healthy. That was the plan, as they were going to rest bodies, and that would have been a very different look in this game, given the impact McCabe had. So it's hard to say, really hard to say. So many factors there. I think you'll see him in the series for sure. I'm not sure if he starts game one, but I think he had a good impression. Being able to score certainly helps too.
Yeah, that's not something you ever expect from Luke Schenn, but it is pretty cool when it does happen. But, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but I almost felt like tonight kind of solidified his spot. I mean, I think back to last year in game number 1, who did Sheldon Keefe go with? He went with Kyle Clifford and Wayne Simmons. Now, he was expecting that series to be an absolute bloodbath, and it ended up being sort of taken away by the officials because they called every penalty under the sun and in the rule book to try to mitigate all of that. But, I just feel like, what we saw tonight is what Sheldon Keefe is looking for. He wants to neutralize, a lot of the shenanigans, and I feel like that's a word we're going to be using a lot in this series with Tampa Bay, but it just seems like he's got the tools now, and he's got guys that not only he feels like he can put in there for those situations, but guys that he can trust in other situations too. I mean, Jake McCabe kind of does it all, and we'll get to him momentarily, but Luke Schenn is a reliable guy in his own end, can clear the front of the net. I know tonight again was a bit of a struggle on one particular play where he was unable to get the puck out of his own zone, which is something that of course is going to be key, but I don't think it's a situation where Sheldon Keefe feels terrible if Luke Schenn is out there in his own end and the Leafs are trying to play some defense, whereas Kyle Clifford and Wayne Simmons, I'm not sure Sheldon Keefe trusts those guys in too many situations outside of offensive zone draws. So it is a little bit different here with Luke Schenn, and you've got the energy factor. You're playing at home in game number 1. This is a guy that could kind of raise the tide, if you will, for the Maple Leafs when it comes to some energy type of plays, whether it's a big hit or maybe he does have to get into some extracurricular activities. But I think I'm kind of siding with that right now, that I'd be surprised if Luke Schenn isn't in there for game number 1, and maybe the Leafs go 11-7 and Schenn is the 7th guy. But I think I'd just be a little bit surprised right now if that was.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the other thing. You mentioned the penalties and all that other stuff, right? I think games 1 through 6 last year was such a penalty fest, and it really didn't tighten up until game 7. Based on what I saw tonight, it looks like it could be the same thing. And they called everything in this. There were a lot of penalties. And so if that continues, that's where Luke Shen maybe doesn't start, because maybe you need more offensive minded people, guys on PP1 and some other, and just more skill out there. Like if the game calls for more skill, I think that's where Luke Shen kind of falls on the wayside. But the game calls for a tight, like if it's a game 7 and almost nothing is going to get called, or it's an elimination game, that's probably where you put Shen in. Like it's really going to be just a matter of when it gets down to the deciding factor, you can push the Luke Shen button that way. But if everything's called, I think you want to have more offensive minded. I like Liljegren in that spot. If that's the case. And then even Gustafsson, they were going to try him on PP1 until he got hurt. So, I think it's going to be an interesting one, and it's going to be really the baseline and feel of the series that dictates when Luke Shen is in and when Luke Shen is out.
All right, let's move on to another member of the D-Corps, and that is Jake McCabe, who was blocking a ton of shots in this one, especially late, had 4 blocked shots and a big key one late at the end, played pretty much the final 3 minutes or so of this game with the Leafs protecting the lead and on the penalty kill as well. But let's hear from head coach Sheldon Keefe, who was super impressed with his blue liner.
This guy just gives us everything he has all the time. And if Gustafsson's healthy, he's not playing here today. In fact, that was the plan. He was going to get tonight off, but I had to go to him yesterday and tell him, we'd like to keep you in, and told him the situation, and he had no hesitation. In fact, he was excited about a chance to play against Tampa. He hadn't seen them in a while and certainly hadn't played against them with us, so he wanted to play tonight. But he's played a lot of minutes, a lot of hockey for us, and he doesn't take a shift off. There's nothing easy about how he plays. So, I thought he was great. Some big blocks on the penalty kill for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'll see Jake McCabe in the season finale. This is probably a guy that needs the ice bath and needs a lot of different things to, rest up for the playoffs. He's obviously throwing his body out there a ton, but it's just hard not to be impressed, right, Dave, with what this guy has brought to this team. For a guy that's never played a playoff game, it's, pretty clear he's going to be pretty amped to step out there next week against Tampa Bay. It just continues to be rock solid in all facets of the game, and for the cap hit as well. The fact that this guy's going to be here next season for $2 million is just an incredible coup by the front office to not only get him, but of course Sam Lafferty, who we'll see come playoff time too. But what did you make of McCabe's game tonight, and what have you made of him just overall?
Yeah, really impressed. You mentioned the cap hit. I still can't get over that the Leafs got that just for how little the return was for a good contract. Like, he's worth the $4 million cap hit that he's getting already. He's playing top 4 minutes. He's been a top 4 guy every game he's played here. He's never been pushed down further than that. So a lot's been asked of him in a short period of time, and he's just risen to the occasion. And he's really been the Muzzin replacement that they've been hoping that they would have. Like, going into the playoffs, at times before they had him, they kind of said they felt they can do it by committee, but in the end, they decided they couldn't. They got McCabe. They're fitting him in. They got him for 2 more years as well. And so, despite the lack of playoff experience and some of those other things, he's been able to jump into this spot and fit in. Sam Lafferty's had a bit more of an adjustment in the time that he's been here. At times, just kind of figuring out where he belongs. But Jake McCabe, they knew exactly where he's in. He's that top 4 guy that can play with a bunch of different people and be asked to do penalty kill and really just be the Muzzin replacement that they had been hoping for. And so by having that, a physical presence, a guy who's responsible blocking shots, doing all those things, it brings a concern level down from when they did lose Muzzin, because Muzzin was pretty effective for them last year in the playoffs, even though he had been out twice with a concussion leading up to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, and he's going to be so key in this series against Tampa, regardless of who his partner is going to be. I know tonight he was kind of all over the place with a bunch of different defensemen, of course, because of the situation, but whether it's been with, TJ Brody or it's been with, someone else on the back end, he's been rock solid and is going to be playing a ton against Tampa Bay, and I imagine he's going to be getting a lot of Tampa's top lines in that series next week. Meanwhile, just as an interesting aside, we know because the Leafs were playing short tonight, Connor Timmins got a look on the wing, which was kind of interesting to see, and just played 8 minutes and 48 seconds, of course, on the wing tonight. This is not going to be something that's of the norm, but just kind of a strange wrinkle. I was looking at the Leafs lineup that they tweeted out prior to the game, and I said, man, this is going to be like a lineup you show people 5 years from now and say, hey, remember this game against Tampa Bay where you just had all these random combinations of lines and players that were playing in this one?
Amateur
arresting
goalie.
People and look, Connor Timmins is on the wing, and an amateur tryout goalie is the backup. I mean, who would have ever thought you would see the goaltending duo as Woll and Onuska as the goaltending tandem? But, it almost looks like this tweet that the Leafs sent out with the projected lineup. It's like almost photoshopped. You're like, wait a second, you're like missing a bunch of things here. But that's just how it worked. Aston Reese, Kampf, and Timmins was the lineup. The line that was written on the projected lineup tweet. It's kind of going to be one of those weird trivia questions about who, a Sporkle, we've talked about it before, Sporkle, this is going to be who was in the lineup for the Leafs April 11th, 2023.
If you factor in all the backups that the Leafs have had this year, I think they're up to like 47 or 48 different Leafs this season. It's kind of nuts the way things have kind of been going there. So, it's really weird, but at the same time, if this would have been a disaster of a season and then guys were kind of out for the season or you're mailing it at the end, I could see a situation like that where it would have looked the same if they were a non-playoff team or they were selling parts or doing things like that. And the lineup would look equally weird at this point of the year. So, you can kind of see it both ways in that regard, but, Connor Timmins getting into the wing spot, they say he's on a developmental path. He's not going to complain because he's got 2.2 million reasons to just kind of go along with the plan.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's, happy to get the opportunity here. It's much better to be in this situation than what was going on in Arizona. That is safe to say. So, cool moment for him to get out there and play some forward. I'm sure he hadn't done that in a long, long time, but just out of necessity with what was going on with the Maple Leafs lineup this evening. All right, let's wrap things up. We kind of teased it leading up to this game, but Media Meal Musings, the sneak preview, if you will, for Amalie Arena, as we'll see the Leafs, of course, head over there next week for games 3 and 4. You have talked a lot about last year, how Tampa really stepped up their game when it came to the media meal in the playoffs.
Yes.
What was it like in the final regular season game out in Tampa Bay?
So I did have the media meal, but I had a very small version of it. I couldn't even film it because of how crazy today was with, again, a media availability just before dinner. And then having to spend an hour and a half writing and explaining what was going on again with the Leafs goaltending situation because, sometimes I have to be a big boy and work. So that happened. But I did manage to squeeze in a pulled pork sandwich, which was very good. And then the best part of all of this was they had this carvery, which they've always had. This carvery. So I had some beef that was pulled off the spit. And it came with this brown sugar glaze. So you pour that glaze on there. And that was fantastic. That was the perfect combination of sweet and savory. And it was I didn't really get to have a lot, but I enjoyed my time in such a short period of time when I was in a rush. I literally was kind of eating and writing at the same time. It was one of those things where, they say in meditation, you really want to kind of just slow it down and really enjoy what you're eating. And then you don't overeat or you just really grab the essence of everything that you're eating. But in this case, I was distracted because I had to work at the same time. But that brown maple glaze with the beef was fantastic. And so, they're right up there. That is a B+ meal tonight. And I expect it will be an A- or better come playoff time.
All right. Wow. That's impressive. A nice way to start things up. Like I said, a little bit of a sneak preview, a little bit of an appetizer, if you will, for the Tampa Bay Lightning as they get set to take on the Maple Leafs next week. But one more game left to play for the regular season. It will go down on Thursday evening when the Maple Leafs head off to Broadway to take on the New York Rangers. We'll see what kind of crazy lineup that Sheldon Keefe will throw
Maybe
out there
you'll get it.
in the maybe Sheldon Keefe will be playing third line left wing, maybe fourth line. Maybe he doesn't want to push himself too hard. Do a little Reg Dunlop, a little player coach, get out there for the season finale. But make sure to tune in here on Rink Wide Toronto as we'll break it all down, the final game of the regular season for the Maple Leafs. Make sure to like, review, and subscribe to the pod wherever you get your favorite pods. You can follow us on Twitter, RinkWideTOR, at DAlter, and at RobWong34. And you can always find the pod at RinkWideToronto.com. For David Alter and producer Aaron, I'm Rob Wong. You've been listening to Rink Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. You've been listening to Rink Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.